I still remember the first time her hand brushed mine, not by accident, not entirely on purpose either. Just enough to make silence feel like it was breathing between us. She was leaning across the counter at the gallery, her voice low, the kind that carried warmth even when she was saying something ordinary. The light from the tall windows fell across her hair, soft brown, threaded with silver that caught the sun like it had secrets of its own. I'd come to drop off the photos I'd promised her weeks ago. That was the excuse. The truth was simpler, harder to name. Eli, she said, looking at the prints one by one, you see people like they're confessing to you. She smiled then, not quite at me, at the pictures, at the honesty of them maybe. Her fingers lingered over a photo of a woman looking away, caught mid-breath. You caught her right before she said something she didn't mean. I wanted to tell her I'd done the same with her, captured moments she didn't realize she was giving away. But I didn't. I only said, you think too much about photographs. And you don't think enough, she replied, still looking at the print. That was Clara, mid-40s, the kind of woman who moved like she'd learned to measure every gesture. Calm, deliberate. Her confidence wasn't loud, it was a kind of quiet gravity that pulled everything toward her. When she finally looked up, I forgot what I was supposed to say next. Her eyes didn't search, they held. Not with the curiosity of someone discovering, but with the recognition of someone remembering. I felt it before I could name it, the sense that she'd seen me long before I dared to see her. We stood too close without realizing it. My shoulder almost brushed hers. The air between us shifted, heavier somehow, like a storm that wouldn't break. She reached for another photo, and her wrist brushed against the back of my hand. Barely. Still, every nerve seemed to recognize it. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. Her hand stayed there for a moment longer than she meant to. Long enough for me to feel the tremor she tried to hide. You're shaking, I said before I could stop myself. No, she whispered, almost smiling. You are. The sound of her voice, steady but softer now, made it hard to breathe evenly. There was no flirtation in it, no teasing. Just something raw. Something like acknowledgement. Outside, someone was laughing on the street. The world was still moving, but inside that gallery, the air barely dared. She stepped back, clearing her throat, trying to fold the moment into something safer. You've improved, she said, nodding at the prints. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't the photos that had changed, it was the way I saw things since her. The way I started noticing quiet gestures, how she always tucked her hair behind her left ear before speaking, how she traced the rim of her coffee cup when she was thinking. Instead, I said, I learned from you. Clara's lips parted like she might respond, but nothing came out. She just exhaled, looked down at the prints again, and ran her thumb over the edge until the paper bent slightly. Then, a sudden sound. The gallery door opened. We both turned. The draft of cold air broke whatever fragile spell we'd been balancing on. She stepped away first, her tone composed again. You should send me the rest next week. But the way her fingers hesitated on the counter, the faint tremor, the reluctant distance, said something else entirely. And I knew then, whatever we'd started, neither of us had the courage to name it yet. I hadn't planned to see her again so soon. But 3 days later, she texted, short, polite, impossible to ignore. You left one of your prints here. It's on my desk if you want it back. No smiley face. No punctuation mistake to soften the tone. Just that. I went anyway. The gallery was closed when I arrived, lights dim, her office door half open. She was inside, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back loosely. She looked different without the public calm, like a painting half finished and honest for once. "You didn't have to come now," she said, not looking up from the papers scattered across her desk. "I was nearby," I lied. She gave a quiet laugh, more breath than sound. "You live across the river, Eli." Her knowing that startled me. It meant she remembered more than she should have. I leaned against the doorway, trying to look casual, but my pulse was a mess. "I thought you'd want the print gone." She finally looked at me, long, steady. "If I wanted it gone, it would be." The air between us thickened again. She gestured for me to come closer, pointing to the photo. It was the one of her, the shot I'd taken last year, when she'd agreed to pose for my class project. She hadn't known I kept that frame. She still didn't know I'd taken others after. In the photo, she wasn't smiling. Her expression was something else, something caught between restraint and surrender. "You shouldn't have kept this," she said quietly. "I know." She brushed her fingers across the edge of the print. "It's dangerous." "Because of you?" "Because of everything," she said, voice thin, fragile now. "You're young, Eli. People will talk. They always do." I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that I hadn't cared for a long time. But the words felt too heavy for that room. Instead, I reached for the print. My fingers met hers. Neither of us moved. Her touch was cool at first, then warm, slow, deliberate. She didn't pull away, not immediately. Her thumb traced the inside of my wrist, as if by accident. "I wasn't always this careful," she murmured. I learned the hard way that closeness costs more than it gives. I almost asked who had taught her that, but the look in her eyes, that flicker of regret, told me enough. Someone had once hurt her deeply, and she'd built her calm like a wall around it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried everything we weren't saying, that she wanted to lean closer, that I already was. I stepped closer anyway. Close enough to smell the faint trace of jasmine on her skin, to hear the uneven rhythm of her breath. She didn't move back this time. Just whispered, "You should go." But her hand stayed on mine a heartbeat longer. And in that heartbeat, the distance between us stopped feeling like protection, and started feeling like the thing we were both afraid to lose. It was raining again the next time I saw her, the kind of steady, soaking rain that makes the city feel smaller, closer. Clara stood under the awning of the cafe across from the gallery, coat damp at the shoulders, hair sticking in thin strands near her temple. She was holding a coffee cup with both hands, like it might anchor her. I crossed the street before I could think better of it. "You'll catch a cold," I said. Her smile was faint. "You sound like someone's husband." "I'm not anyone's anything." That made her look at me, really look. For a moment, I thought she might say something sharp, something to put the wall back up. Instead, she stepped aside. "Get out of the rain." We stood there together, the sound of it hitting the pavement just loud enough to make silence feel private. The air smelled like wet concrete and coffee. Her perfume was faint, something clean, with a trace of warmth that stayed too long in the lungs. "I shouldn't keep running into you," she said finally. "It looks like what?" Her eyes flicked toward the cafe window, where two of her colleagues were seated inside, half turned in our direction. She lowered her voice. "Complicated." I followed her gaze. One of them was whispering something behind her cup. Clara's jaw tightened, but her smile didn't falter. "Let them talk," I said quietly. "That's easy for you." Her tone was soft, but there was an edge beneath it. "You're young. When you make a mistake, it's a story. When I do, it's a headline." For a moment, neither of us moved. The rain filled the pause, steady, relentless. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, the screen lit up with a name she didn't answer. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned it face down. "Someone important?" I asked. "Not anymore," she said. I didn't press. I just watched the way she held herself, shoulders straight, chin lifted, but her fingers tight around the cup like she needed something to grip. "Come inside," I said. "Just for a minute." She hesitated, then followed. The cafe was nearly empty, warm light, low music. We found a corner table away from the window. She sat across from me, eyes down, tracing the rim of her cup again. "You make it hard to stay reasonable," she whispered. "Then stop trying." Her eyes met mine, startled, searching. The air thickened. The space between our hands felt unbearable. She reached to move her hair back, and her fingers brushed my cheek. Just a fleeting touch, but it froze everything. I leaned in before I could think, the smell of coffee and rain between us, her breath catching. Her lips parted slightly, not an invitation, but not a refusal either. Then, the bell over the cafe door chimed. She pulled back. A friend of hers, the same woman from the gallery, was walking in, shaking her umbrella dry. Clara's hand slipped from mine under the table. The friend waved, smiling. Clara returned it, too fast, too bright. When the woman turned away, Clara whispered, barely moving her lips, "This has to stop." But she didn't move. Neither did I. Her knee brushed mine beneath the table. Once. Then again, slower this time. And I realized, for all the things she said should stop, her body hadn't learned the language yet. I hadn't seen her in a week. Long enough for logic to almost make sense again. Long enough to think maybe she'd meant it when she said it had to stop. Then she called. Just my name, no reason, no context. Her voice sounded like it had been waiting for me before she even dialed. When I got to her apartment, she didn't ask why I came. She just opened the door and stepped aside. The room was dim, lit only by the city glow leaking through the curtains. Her shoes were by the door, her hair down, unguarded. She looked both relieved and terrified to see me. "I shouldn't have called," she said. "I know. But you came." "I always will," I said, before I could stop myself. She exhaled, a soft, trembling sound. "Don't say things like that." The air between us was too still. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the steady rain outside. Everything else felt suspended. She moved past me toward the window, arms crossed like she needed something to hold on to. "You think this is simple," she said. "You don't see the wreckage that follows." "I see you," I said. She turned then, eyes bright in the low light. "You see what you want. You don't see the woman who's afraid to be wanted again." I stepped closer. "Then show me her." Her breath hitched. The distance shrank until I could smell the faint sweetness of her shampoo, see the pulse in her throat. "Eli," she warned, but it wasn't steady. Her voice broke somewhere between restraint and wanting. I lifted my hand, hesitating before touching her. When I did, it was only to brush a strand of hair from her cheek. My fingers lingered longer than they should have. She didn't move away. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "I know." Her eyes flicked to my mouth, once, quickly, then away. She took half a step back, but the wall met her before distance could. She was trembling again, the same as before, but this time she didn't hide it. "This isn't who I am," she said. "Maybe it's who you were always allowed to be," I murmured, voice low near her ear. Her breath caught, sharp. My hand found the curve of her shoulder, her skin warm even through the fabric. She closed her eyes, head tilting slightly toward me. For a moment, the world stopped measuring what was right. It was just the space between us, narrowing, electric. Her hand came up, fingertips grazing my jaw, slow, uncertain. The touch burned in the quiet. "I shouldn't want this," she whispered. "Then tell me to go." She didn't. Instead, she leaned forward just enough for her forehead to touch mine, a fragile, shaking confession. Her breath brushed my lips. I could taste the edge of coffee, of hesitation, of something breaking open. Then, a sudden knock. Sharp, jarring. She froze. "Clara? You home?" a man's voice called through the door. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but recognition. She stepped back, whispering, "You have to hide." I didn't move. And in that suspended second, before everything unraveled, her hand found mine again, a desperate, trembling grip that said everything she couldn't. The man at the door was her ex-husband. I didn't need her to say it, I saw it in the way her body went still, in the small panic behind her composure. "Clara?" His voice came again, closer now. She turned to me, eyes wide, whispering, "Go, please." There was nowhere to go. The window was rain-streaked and too far from the ground. The hallway behind her was narrow, dark. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then she pulled me by the wrist, quick, desperate, into the small study at the back. She closed the door softly, her breath shallow. Through the wall, I could hear his voice, low, familiar, domestic. "You left your phone off again." I tried calling. "I've been busy," she said, her tone controlled now, but too calm to be real. I stood in the dark, listening. Her voice drifted in and out, phrases like, "You can't just show up," and, "I told you it's over." He laughed once. "You always say that." Something in me twisted, a sharp, jealous thing I didn't recognize. I hated that he still sounded like he knew her, that he could say her name so easily. When the front door finally closed, I exhaled. Clara came back into the study, closing the door behind her again, this time slower. Her face was pale. She leaned against the frame, eyes shut. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For letting you see that part of my life." "I didn't see anything," I said. "You handled it." But she laughed softly, a humorless, tired sound. "You saw everything. You saw what's left of me after people are done loving me." I stepped closer. "That's not what I saw." She opened her eyes then, wet, shining in the dim light. "You think you know what this is?" "I was married to him for 14 years. 14. I forgot what it's like to be looked at without expectation." Her voice cracked, then steadied again. "And then you came in with your camera and your quiet questions and," she stopped herself, pressing her fingers to her lips like she could take the words back. "I closed the space between us." "And what?" She looked up, trembling. And you made me remember what it feels like to want something I shouldn't. Her confession hung there, heavy, raw. Before I could respond, she stepped past me toward the desk, wiping her face. You should go, she said, though her voice betrayed her. I'm not leaving you like this. You don't get to save me, Eli. I reached out, gently catching her wrist before she could move away again. I'm not trying to. I just can't pretend this isn't real anymore. Her breath caught. Her hand tightened in mine. Then she said, barely above a whisper, if you stay, everything changes. I know. Neither of us moved. Her pulse thudded beneath my fingers. The air between us felt electric, like the moment before lightning strikes, when the world goes completely still. And this time, when she didn't let go, I knew she'd already made her choice, even if neither of us could admit it yet. The night had already stretched too long, the kind that feels borrowed from consequence. Clara stood by the window again, the rain still whispering against the glass. She hadn't turned on the lights. Her reflection flickered faintly in the pane, a double image, one looking out, the other looking back at me. You shouldn't have stayed, she said softly. You asked me to. I didn't ask, she murmured, voice trembling. You stayed because you wanted to. I moved closer. So did you. Her shoulders rose with a slow breath. Don't make this harder. But when I reached out, not touching her yet, just close enough for her to feel the warmth, she didn't step away. The silence was heavy, full of everything we'd both been avoiding. My hand hovered near her arm, the air between us warm, charged. I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist, I said. She turned then, and for the first time, she didn't hide the fear in her eyes. You don't understand what you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything, I said. I'm choosing you. Her lips parted like the words startled her. She shook her head, half in disbelief, half in surrender. You don't even know me. I know enough, I said, stepping closer until her breath touched my chin. You're afraid. You still care what people think. You still carry his voice in your head. But none of that changes what's happening right now. Her breath quickened. She looked down, her fingers twisting together. If we cross this line, it's already crossed, I whispered. I lifted my hand to her face, brushing a strand of hair away. Her skin was warm beneath my fingertips, her pulse fast at her throat. She leaned into the touch before catching herself, eyes flicking to mine, searching, warning, wanting. Eli, she breathed, almost a plea. I hesitated, the smallest pause, enough for both of us to feel how fragile the moment was. My thumb traced the line of her jaw. Her lips trembled, and she closed her eyes. Then she stepped forward. Not a word, just movement, slow, deliberate. Her hand found my chest, not pushing me away but grounding herself. The distance between us dissolved. Her forehead rested against mine. We stayed like that, motionless, both of us caught between choice and consequence. I spent years trying to be careful, she whispered. To do what was expected. But right now, her voice broke. I don't want careful. Something inside me cracked open at that. I cupped her face, tilting it up just enough for her to meet my eyes. Then don't be. She exhaled, a trembling sound that felt like release. The air between us thickened until it was almost unbearable. Her hand slid to the back of my neck. My breath caught. The world outside blurred into nothing but the sound of rain and her pulse against mine. And in that suspended second, right before the moment that would change everything, she looked at me with a calm, steady certainty I hadn't seen before. Now we both understood, whatever happened next wouldn't be a mistake. It would be a choice. Morning came quietly, the kind that doesn't announce itself, just seeps in through the curtains, soft and forgiving. Clara was sitting on the edge of the couch, one knee drawn up, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The city outside was still wet, silver light bouncing off the windows. I stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure what to say. The air felt fragile, like anything too loud would break it. She glanced up, then smiled, tired, but real. "You didn't sleep. Did you?" She shook her head. "Not really." I crossed the room and sat beside her. Close, but not touching. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore, it was something quieter, gentler. "I kept thinking about what you said," she whispered. "That you're choosing me." I meant it. Her eyes softened. "You don't owe me anything, Eli. You could still walk away." "I could," I said. "But I won't." She let out a small laugh, the kind that carried both disbelief and relief. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I admitted. But neither was trying not to. For a long moment, we just sat there. The rain had stopped, but droplets still clung to the window, sliding down in slow, uncertain paths, like they hadn't decided where to fall yet. Clara reached for the coffee on the table, her hand brushing mine. The touch was unintentional, maybe. But she didn't pull away. "I used to think," she said quietly, "that love was something that belonged to younger people. That it was supposed to fade into memory after a certain age. I built a life around that idea, safe, sensible, quiet." She turned to me, her voice almost a whisper. "You reminded me it's still allowed to feel like this." I smiled. "And how does it feel?" She looked at me for a long time before answering. "Terrifying." Then, softer, "Beautiful." That made me laugh, but not the nervous kind. The kind that comes when everything finally makes sense. I reached out and took her hand, slowly, making sure she could pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. Our fingers intertwined easily, naturally, as though they'd done it 1,000 times before. For the first time, she leaned into me, her head resting lightly against my shoulder. I could feel the warmth of her skin through the blanket, her breath steady now. Neither of us said anything more. We didn't need to. The questions that had filled every silence before, what will people think? What happens next? Didn't matter now. In that quiet morning light, it was just her hand in mine, her body soft against me, the faint scent of jasmine and rain still clinging to her hair. I pressed a slow kiss to her forehead. She closed her eyes and smiled, not guarded this time, but certain. And for once, the silence between us wasn't restraint. It was peace.